So, when did you first decide to become a musician?
When did I want to become a musician or decide to become a musician?
Both? Which came first?
Okay. I suppose wanting to become a musician obviously comes first. And my elder brother, he used to buy a lot of records and bring on new records every Friday. Plays records, and I was just straight away. I just loved music and always wondered how you made it, and I wanted to be part of that really. And then I think when I was 15, my dad took me to buy a second-hand guitar, or maybe 14 actually. I mean, before that I played trumpet in the brass band at school, in the junior school, but I didn't consider that being a musician because it wasn't the type of music I liked.
Yeah.
So, and it's when punk happened in '76 that my guitar became alive, because I could make up songs on it, very easily. Yeah. Because punk made you able to do that,
When did you first come aware of punk?
I think as soon as it happened, really. I mean, I was born in 1960, so in 1976 I was 16.
Right, got you. Yeah.
So I was the right age, when punk happened.
Yeah.
To know about it, and I used to just go to loads of gigs in Manchester.
Yeah.
When I was 16, there was just gigs everywhere. It was non-stop. You went to as many gigs as you could afford to, really. So yeah. So I was aware of it. As soon as it started happening, really. It was like, it was really exciting, because not only were you just finishing school, but this whole new thing was happening, that just, it felt like a movement for people our age, really. Yeah. I mean, all the people in the bands were older than us. They were older than me at school. They would have been about 18, 19. So when you're 16, and 18, 19-year-old's quite old.
So, how did you first meet ACR? Because you were in a different band, weren't you, to start with?
Yeah, I first met ACR at I think it was their third gig. And it was the first, or it might have been their second gig, and it was the first gig that Jez played, and I was playing in another band called Alien Tint, and we were playing on the same bill as A Certain Ratio, and the guys from A Certain Ratio thought, he looks a bit out of place in that band, he's wearing the same clothes and he's got the same sort of haircut as us, he's got the same style as us. So they spoke to me after the gig. I went to them and said, I really like your gig. And they said, do you want to join us? So I said, yeah. So that was that.
There's quite a few different musical influences, weren't you? If you're in the band, you all had sort of different tastes, and that sort of came together, didn't it? That's why your music was so varied.
No, we all had very similar tastes when we came together. We'd fallen out of love with punk.
Right.
Punk was a load of shit by then.
Right.
And we were looking for things that were the opposite to punk, really. Like Kraftwerk, Brian Eno.
Yeah.
And then, in a more punky sense, sort of Velvet Underground. We liked Wire as well, and anything that sort of moved away from the thrash of punk, really.
Yeah.
And stuff that was a little bit sort of weirder and more electronic, you know.
So how did you get to get to be noticed by Factory Records?
It was Rob Gretton, who was Joy Division's manager at the time, who saw us when we played at the Manchester Musicians Collective on the same bill as Joy Division. And Rob Gretton, who's Joy Division's manager, saw us playing and asked, and the next time he saw Tony Wilson, he said, I've seen this brilliant band, you'll really like them, called A Certain Ratio. So, because we didn't have any gigs coming up, Tony Wilson said, right, we'll put them on at the Factory Club next Friday, support in the fall, I think. So we got asked to do the gig by Tony and did the gig, and he really loved us and asked us if he could manage us. So that's how that happened.
Right, okay.
It's because of Rob Gretton.
So when was your first gig? Your first gig with A Certain Ratio, how did that go? Did you sort of merge in quite seamlessly with the rest of the band?
Yeah, we had one rehearsal and around at Jez's mum and dad's, and basically the songs were really simple, 3 chords at the most, what maybe is some even one, and the songs were basically jams back then, so they didn't have much structure or anything, so it was quite easy, really.
Yeah.
And I just felt like, this is the sort of thing I want to do,
Yeah.
We were all like-minded in how we basically wanted to be different. We didn't want to be like anyone else, really.
Yeah.
And we spent a lot of time trying not to be like anyone. First recording session was All Night Party, which was at Cargo Studios in Rochdale with Martin Hannett. It was a 16-track studio. Yeah, we basically didn't do anything much different to how we did it live. So because we didn't have a drummer at the time, me, Pete, and Jez played together, and Simon did the guide vocal, and then we did a couple of overdubs, and then we did 2 tunes. We did it all in one night, so it was quite a simple process, really. We took to it like ducks to water, and really enjoyed the studio side of things as well.
When did you decide to change and have the drummer join you?
Well, we didn't have a drum machine or anything. It's me and Pete. The guitars sort of kept the rhythm, really.
Yeah.
We wanted a drummer because we started playing. We started listening to funk, well, not started, but we started getting more into stuff like Parliament and Funkadelic and funk music, and thought, we don't want to play this industrial stuff anymore. We want to play funk music. We said to Tony Wilson, we need a funk drummer. So Tony went and asked a drummer called Toby, who's playing in Ludus at the time, if he knew any funk drummers, and Toby says, yeah, I know just the guy, Donald, who lives in Wythenshawe, my mate. So that's how we got Donald.
What was your first impression of Tony?
He was that knobhead off the TV. It was quite impressive meeting somebody who you watched on Granada Reports every day when you got home from work, and you sat with your mum and dad having your tea, and Tony was on. Yeah, so he was his enthusiasm and his love of music and art really sort of rubbed off on us, you know. So he wasn't just that knobhead off TV. He was this guy who was really, really into music, you know.
And because I've read a few books and stuff, and I've seen the great film, you know, 24 Hour Party People. Was it really like that? I mean, did you have no contracts and things like that?
24 Hour Party People's a comedy, really, and yeah, I worked on the film myself. I was a musical
director.
Yeah. No, there weren't any contracts.
Yeah.
But that wasn't because they were unorganised or anything like that. It was the fact that Tony didn't believe in them, and he thought if you work with people that you really, really like, and they like what you want to do for them, why do you need a contract?
Yeah.
So, yeah, there were no contracts, and the split was a 50-50 split after profit, but 50% of what, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a 50-50 split's very difficult to account for, because the costs can go on forever, you know.
Yeah.
Didn't do bad out of it.
Yeah.
We didn't do bad out of it financially. We were on a wage for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were professional musicians. We that was our job, you know.
Yeah, I think Jez mentioned in the on your first album, he thought he was a bit concerned that Martin Moscrop was trying to make you sound a bit too much like Joy Division. What would you think about that? Do you think that was right?
No, he wasn't trying to make us sound like Joy Division. Martin Moscrop had a production style that was very unique.
Yeah.
And obviously his production style with Joy Division was the same production style with us. So that gothic type of sound that he got, he got that with every band that he worked with. So as a band live, we were very, very different. Joy Division were very different live to what they were on record. They had the same energy, but they didn't have that gothic, ethereal sound that Martin had in the studio. We were sort of, we just on two each, we'd start playing like funk stuff, and we sounded very funky live, but as soon as we got in the studio with Martin Moscrop, he turned us into like a funk goth band, you know.
Right.
So yeah, it didn't really suit us, which is why our next album, Sextet, which we produced ourselves, was a lot more ACR, you know.
Yeah. Did Tony actually say that? It's probably just a made-up quote for the film, but he said that you had the energy of Joy Division, but with a better wardrobe. Was that a real?
I'm not sure if it was Tony that said it or Rob, but yes, I think. Yeah, I think he said we were better dressed or better wardrobe. I can't remember. Yeah. We had a totally different energy to Joy Division, you know.
Yeah.
Their energy was a lot more rocky than ours. We weren't into rock music at all, you know.
Yeah.
Rock music disappeared from our vocabulary in 1977 when we, as you know, not as a band but as people, when we fell out of love with punk music, you know.
Yeah. How did writing in the band go? Did you all? Was it just a case of jamming and getting a tune going, or you know, did you have certain roles?
Yeah, I mean, with ACR in the early days, it was all about jamming.
Yeah.
And we'd either jam in our rehearsal room, and then if we had a gig that week, the tune that we'd been jamming, we'd play it live. We'd produce in the rehearsal room context, and others we'd make up in the studio. So yeah, I'd say it was 50-50. 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50% 50 50% of them would have been come from jams, and the other 50 would have been built in the studio around a rhythm section. We'd get bored with an idea very quickly, so the sooner we recorded it, the better, really.
Yeah.
Because then you can put that tune to bed, start on the next one. We were famous for going out and promoting an album and not even playing the album that had just come out. We'd be playing the next lot of jams that we were making up.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone said they went to see us when we were supposed to be promoting Two Each.
Yeah.
And we were playing songs off Sextet. that wasn't even out yet.
Right. Well, you toured with Talking Heads, didn't you, in '79?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of sort of speculation that that's why they got more sort of funkier, because they were quite sort of post-punk before then, weren't they?
Yeah, it's a nice story to believe, but I mean, you know, if you spend a few gigs with somebody, if you like them, then that's bound to have an impression on you.
Yeah, sure.
Talking Heads had a massive impression on us, and will have changed the way that we thought about music. They really inspired us as to what you need to do to make your live performance good.
Yeah.
Because before that, we used to think, oh, audiences are a load of shite. You know, they're just something that has to be there when you do a gig. We never thought about how well you had to perform to make it a good gig. But seeing Talking Heads do it really inspired us. And I'm sure some of our set and some of our music inspired them as well.
Tony took you to America, didn't he, for a while?
Yeah, we went to America to record our second album, Two Each. I mean, it was always thought of as our first studio album because The Graveyard and the Ballroom was a cassette-only album. Yeah. At the time. Yeah, we went there. We stayed there for a month, I think, and we spent a couple of weeks in the studio doing the album, and we did quite a lot of gigs around New York and the East Coast.
Because you came across Madonna, didn't you, at some point? It's a famous story about that.
That was in 82 or 83, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first time we went was 1980.
Ah, okay.
I think when we met Madonna, that was the third time we went.
Right, got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so didn't they paid for her to go onto the bill, didn't they, or something like that, just so that she could be seen by a producer or something, a record company?
Yeah, I think it was Sire Records that wanted to see her.
Yeah.
Jelly Bean, who was her producer, was actually with her at the gig. He pressed go on the 4-track tape machine. Yeah.
Back to 24 Hour Party People, if that's okay. It was a great film.
Yeah.
They had to recreate the hacienda, didn't they, in the warehouse? How realistic was it? Was it quite, authentic?
It was frighteningly real. Yeah. It inside, when you were inside, you felt like you were inside the hacienda. It's when you went out to the toilets that you went out and you saw the scaffolding outside. But while you were inside, it was very, very realistic. It was all built to scale. Yeah.
And what did you, because you were music director, like you said, so what did you do on the film then? What was your role on that?
I had quite a few roles. I mean, I'd been to a lot of the gigs that they recreated in the film, you know, like Susie and the Banshees and Joy Division and a load of the early gigs in Manchester. And my job was to help them recreate those gigs. I provided extras from the college that I worked at.
Yeah.
I went in the studio and recorded versions of the songs for playback so that they didn't have any copyright issues.
Right.
I taught the actors to be musicians.
Right.
And I taught them to play instruments. And actually, the Happy Mondays, who we called the Crappy Undies, the actors, by the end of the film, they were actually playing the songs, and we were recording what they were playing rather than miming to playback.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So I sort of had to learn the songs and then had to teach them. And even if they weren't playing to playback, I wanted it to be very realistic. Like I'd make sure they were playing the right chords or the right notes on the bass.
Yeah.
Just so it didn't look like whenever you see music in films, it's so cheesy, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be cheesy like that. Yeah.
So back to the sort of late 70s and 80s and that sort of thing. So when Factory started to sort of implode, were you aware of any of it? You know, did you see it happening basically?
Factory was a big family, so you all knew what was going on with each other. The first problem we had with Factory was when we released the album Force. We booked a massive tour of Europe, the biggest tour we've ever done, where we went out for 4 to 6 weeks it was. And every city we got to, the album wasn't out there yet. Right. So it was almost like we'd wasted our time doing this, travelling all around Europe. So we weren't too happy about that. They owed us money, and this is in '86. This isn't when Factory went bust. It's when we left Factory because they owed us money and they couldn't pay us what they owed us. So we just said, all right, well, we'll have all our masters, thank you, and went to the Factory offices and just took all our masters off the shelves, the multi-tracks and the stereo masters, and took them. Right. It's the best thing we ever did because we're still making money out of those masters now. We own all our own music, you know. Yeah. Whereas if we hadn't have done that, London Records would have owned it all.
Right. So why did you sign with the was A&M? A&M, wasn't it?
Yeah. We wanted to experiment, being on a bigger label, to see if we could have commercial success. Yeah. But it didn't work because A&M didn't understand us, and A&M were in the process of collapsing. But what we did do was we got a big advance off them, and we built a recording studio, and we made some really good albums in the studio, you know. Yeah.
How much do you think that your music style's changed since the early days? Obviously you do evolve as a band, don't you? But what do you think's a big change since the early days?
Maturity, 45 more years of listening to such beautiful music from all around the world. Yeah. Being inspired by that music, being inspired by rhythms from every continent, being inspired by music from every continent, and being able to funnel all that back into our music. It's a lot easier to do that now that we're mature musicians than it was back then.
Yeah.
Our first trip to New York, which Tony wanted us to record in New York for that to influence us. I mean, that first trip to New York and all the music we saw in New York, that developed us into people, you know, and each subsequent trip to New York, all our trips to Europe, you know, they all developed us as people and musicians, and that's in the music that we produce now.
Yeah. You went back to Rob.
Whereas when we were making...
Go on, sorry. Carry on.
Sorry. If we had a record that we made in 1980 would have only had you know, 2 years worth of live musical experience. A record we make now is 45 years worth of live musical experience, you know.
Yeah, for definite. Well, you went back to Rob Gretton's company, didn't you, after a while, to release records?
Yeah, Rob's Records, yeah.
Yeah. Was that a great homecoming for you?
It was amazing, yeah. Rob was always our biggest fan. And he just really looked after us. Rob was a huge mentor, you know. He always had a soft spot for a certain radio, and he just loved our music. He loved everything we did, so he was the ideal label for us, you know.
Do you think you'll ever retire from performing?
Well, you have to retire at some point, don't you?
Yeah.
I mean, I saw Pharaoh Sanders at We Out Here Festival last year. Unfortunately, he's passed away now, but he was playing right to his deathbed, you know.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different if you're American, because as a lot of musicians won't have health insurance. They don't have pensions like they don't have state pensions like we do. So, you know, I think even though this country's seriously fucked up, I think you can still retire as a musician and be semi-comfortable. We've got another 10 years yet.
Yeah. Cool.
That's what we've given ourselves, and we're trying to make as many records in that 10 years as we can.
Yeah.